cause we own them.
I waited my entire life for this.
Number 6, Black Panther. Alright, so next up is another comic book movie, and a really cool one that I'm glad we get to talk about here. Black Panther, it's almost easy to forget that it came out in 2018, but enough people correctly remembered that it came out in 2018, I did remind people in the nominations video, so I'm sure that helped, that this movie was there and introduced us to Wakanda in a big way. It was a big movie that made a huge dent in the worldwide box office and got a lot of people excited about Black Panther who really didn't care about the character whatsoever before. I'm glad this won, not only because I voted for it and definitely believe it is one of the best stories told in 2018, but also because we haven't actually reviewed this movie yet here on Comic Island. For whatever reason, it kind of slipped through the cracks when the movie actually came out. So I haven't really had a chance to touch on any of this stuff yet, and I'm glad we have the ability to do so here. A lot of people by now have voiced their opinion on Black Panther. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube all about it that go really into detail and defending this movie or picking it apart bit by bit. To say this is a perfect movie or even the best comic book movie that came out this year would, I think, be fundamentally dishonest. This is an imperfect movie with lots of little problems. The biggest one that bothers me is the inconsistency in CGI effects. Some of them look amazing, like this last fight between Killmonger and T'Challa in the vibranium mines under Wakanda. That entire fight looks great and has lots of great moments in it. But it's paired with a big finale fight with these CGI rhinos that look pretty awful. Meanwhile, there's another scene much earlier in the film that features one of the best shots I think in the entire MCU so far, where there's this big fight scene in the casino that's all shot through this amazing continuous take that goes up and down on different levels. It's really cool and super well done. But then action scene goes on and continues into the street where it just starts to drag on, but more importantly, we suddenly get terrible effects again, and Black Panther's costume as he's jumping around on the streets and doing all those crazy things suddenly looks awful again. It's remarkably inconsistent, but at the disservice of the movie, and to be honest, the biggest problem with this film. Now, I think part of this is the growing pains of the MCU. As this film studio and enterprise expands more and more, they've had to rely on more and more companies to do different CGI effects for their movies. And finding the ones that can actually put together a decent shot and that Disney is willing to pay a reasonable amount for good work for can be difficult and is an ongoing challenge for this company. But that doesn't excuse it, and if anything, really holds this movie back. Especially considering the action scenes already feel pretty bloated and dragged out, being something that I think pulls people away from their interest in this movie. Had they simply cut some of the weaker looking effects, no matter how expensive I'm sure they were, this movie would have probably worked a lot better because people would have liked the less amount of action if what action we got looked consistently better. But aside from that, this is a really awesome movie that does a lot of things the MCU is known for being weaker for right. The biggest example of which, of course, is Killmonger. One of the best MCU villains to date, perhaps the best one were it not for the fact that Thanos went along and really stole the show in the following MCU movie after this. There are other things that really bothered me the first time I watched this movie that since then I've come around to and I've started to really appreciate about this film more than consider a weak point of the movie itself. The biggest example of that is the fact that Wakanda, supposedly an advanced technological civilization, still relies on these old cultural tropes of having a fight to the death to determine who is the rightful ruler of your country, and in turn giving that monarch such absolute power that he can destroy your country's future by burning down those Wakandan flower thingies that enable a person to have the powers of Black Panther. This gets into something I was actually complaining on the worst of 2018 list earlier in another video. It's a really bad habit of these superhero shows to burn down valuable aspects of their own world building, and in doing so, it makes their world feel that much weaker. The fact that there could never be a Black Panther again, supposedly from the destruction of these flowers, is a pretty significant loss, and while I understand that the movie needs to do this for stakes, that felt artificial and unnecessary. It made Wakanda seem stupid and almost weak, given how easily Killmonger was able to co-opt the society and force them to do this. But over time, I've started to really appreciate this plot point. It's a key aspect of the overall story of Black Panther, that Wakanda, while a great civilization, sat back while the rest of Africa burned, and has extreme traditional weaknesses in its society that T'Challa has to learn to confront and overrule. I hope the sequels to this franchise get into this further, and my guess is they most certainly will. And that's the really fun and awesome part about Black Panther. For all of its flaws and imperfect aspects of its nature, this is the first movie in a franchise that had to cover a lot of ground. It's a real opportunity to build up on this first movie in really fun and interesting ways. There's all kinds of cool and unique concepts they can take with the character and all the supporting crew that surrounds Black Panther, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how all of that stuff goes in the future. So this movie is important, and the records that it set and what it means for the future of box office returns and the diversity behind who is featured in those blockbuster movies. But it's also a great movie that stands well on its own. Though I kind of agree with the results of this list, it wasn't the best story to come out this year, it wasn't even the best comic book movie to come out this year. It was great and absolutely, unquestionably one of the best superhero movies to come out in 2018, a year that was already very competitive in this regard. It's a very cool new setting that Marvel has already come back to in the MCU in their following movie in Infinity War, it being the setting of the climax of that film, essentially, and it being a very cool choice for that. I am sure we'll see more of Wakanda in Endgame and inevitably in Black Panthers 2 and 3, along with this cast and crew that has really proven themselves in a big way with this first film. The design, music, and aspects of this film from a production standpoint are phenomenal. Even a simple shot like this, where the camera's upside down and very obviously is just indicating that everything in Wakanda has gone upside down now that Killmonger has taken over, is also one of my other favorite shots in all of the MCU. So that's 2 in one movie. That's an incredible thing in a franchise that has well over a dozen movies at this point. So yeah, I love this movie. Thanks for voting on it. It definitely deserved to be here. And keep in mind that if this is only at number 6, yeah, the next 5 things we're talking about are really cool and, in my opinion, totally stepped up the game in terms of comic book stories and what we can expect out of their adaptations. But next up is another worst of title. And it's going to be a comic book that a lot of people voted on, which kind of surprised me, but we're going to talk about that more when we get to it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.